Hello, and thanks for joining us. For the Looking Back series, I'm Mary Ann Pleva. Our guest today is truly extraordinary. A Chester resident, David Rao holds a degree in art history from the University of Michigan. He has been with Old Lyme's Florence Griswold Museum for over 25 years and serves as curator of visitor engagement. He also teaches museum studies at Connecticut College in New London and is himself an artist. Always creative, David has a passion for life and work that shows through in all he does. And I'm pleased to welcome David Rao today to our show. Thank you, David.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Welcome. We have a lot of questions here, so we're going to get right to it.
Perfect.
And we'll get to the beginning. So what part of the Midwest are you from?
So I was born and raised in Detroit, Michigan. First, we lived in a suburb of Redford, and then eventually in the suburb of Livonia. And yeah, it was a great place to grow up. My family, we had a family business. We had a family gas station, and so we worked with family, and really close ties.
And what was it like? What were some of your family remembrances? Was it all around the gas station?
Well, it's funny though. The whole day was kind of Dad went to work and then Dad came home, and so but he never came home at the same time. So it was really always kind of like saying, "What's for dinner?" It's like, "Well, we're going to have something when Dad gets home, whenever that is." So what was nice is it wasn't so regimented. We just kind of lived.
Yeah. And if you want to see Dad, you have to go to the gas station,
well,
right?
Yeah, and Livonia is a really beautiful place to live. It was a new suburb, and lots of it just changed our lives. Better schools than I had before, and lots of opportunities. But because it was a community gas station, we really were part of the community, which is great. I remember when we would go to church, everybody in the parking lot, knew my dad.
Yeah.
They wanted free advice about this and the other thing, but it's always nice to be part of a community. And I think that kind of family business, being raised in a family business, even though it was a huge community, kind of led me to what I love about New England and small town living.
And you have, I got to ask you another thing about the gas stations, but do you have siblings?
Yes, so it's a big family. So I have 2 brothers and 2 sisters. I am number 4 out of 5. But the family, had different age groups. So at some point I was the baby of the family for a while, and then I was the older brother for my younger sister. So I have a personality, I think, that encapsulates both being a baby and being the firstborn. But it was during a time period where families like to name their kids after the same letter, so we're all D's.
Okay.
So it's Dennis, Devin, Denise, David, and Dory. And so whenever you put your initials on anything like a record, it didn't really matter because everything was DR.
Yeah, my sister did that when she has all D's too, strangely enough.
Some Davids?
No Davids.
Well,
no,
there's still time.
No, I don't think so. So you worked at the gas station too, didn't you?
Yeah, well, with a family business, when times are, sometimes times are great, sometimes times are hard. When times are hard, everybody pulls their weight.
Yeah.
And even my mother. My mother was the bookkeeper, and she would do all the banking. Gas station life is not meant necessarily for me. I'm not very mechanical. I don't like getting dirty. I don't like grease and oil on my hands. My brothers were fantastic mechanics.
Yeah.
But I was a good people person, so I was good at customer service, I was really good at making the oil cans look like Christmas trees during the holidays.
The decorative types,
yeah, I could
right?
use oil cans in a creative outlet. So, and my family was very forgiving, and they would just let me be who I was.
Yeah. So just out of curiosity, how many pumps back then?
Oh, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And we had to pump gas. So I think we had 3 islands, and each one had 2, so 6
wow,
pumps.
that's bigger than I thought you were going to say.
Yeah, no, it was one of these giant suburban gas stations. So and then we had a garage, so we fixed cars, and we sold, delicious candy bars.
Right.
And so,
right.
a place for everyone.
But not sandwiches. Not that modern.
Not that modern, right?
Right. So were you an art and history lover as a young person?
What's interesting, my parents went to the high school orientation night, and they came home and they said they learned about this new program that the high school was doing called Global Education. And they said, the kind of things that I'm interested in, they thought that I should try this. It was kind of a high school within a high school. And you were with 75 of the same kids for all 4 years, and they really tried to break apart how the school day operated. And so they could spend, more than 45 minutes on a subject. And they had a lot of art, culture, world religions in that, in their curriculum. And I think that's where, I remember having a brochure with a mask of King Tut on it and finding that really interesting. And slowly I realized that that was the humanities and that was art history. So I was always interested in art and art history, but I never knew the words.
So how did you actually get interested? I read somewhere that you were thinking of a law going.
So I'm the first in my family to go officially to college. My brothers and sisters, they went to community college and then, work or family or relationships, and they, didn't continue. So I was the first to go, and I went to Michigan State University. I didn't have a lot of pioneers in my life, so I just had figured it out by friends. And I ended up being in a pre-law program with a Japanese language major. So I don't know what I was thinking. I guess I was going to be a lawyer in Japan. But, and back then, back in the day, computers allegedly were going to be very big in the future. So that was another thing that I was thinking about. And then my first year in MSU was great, but it wasn't exactly what I needed. I didn't really like being away from my family as much. And so I transferred to the University of Michigan program in Dearborn, Michigan. I was in this long line of people signing up for classes. I was going to get ready for my computer class, whatever that meant. And a man in that line said that he was taking a course in the art history department. And I said, what is that all about? Your parents are paying all this money and you're going to be sitting in the dark looking at pictures? And he said, it's a lot harder than you think. And I'm like, I'll see. And then there was a modern architecture course. I remember it, vividly. I took that class. I just couldn't get enough of it. And I eventually fell into the art history world. One of the professors, though, said, if you become an art history major, I'll help you find your way. And I said, well, what do people do with art history? And he said, well, some people teach. And I said, well, I can't do that. You're an amazing teacher. I can't be you. And he said, and other people work in museums. And that's when the big light bulb went off, because I've always loved museums and cultural organizations, but never knew the steps. So he said to me, if you want to invest in art history, I'll invest in you and get you an internship. And from that moment in my undergraduate until now, I've worked in museums ever since. So I know I'm really lucky that not everybody gets that kind of a background or support, but it all kind of fell into place pretty quickly. And I think it's just because my parents went to that one parent night and went to that one room and said, let's try this.
But it's so interesting about the gentleman that was in line with you, because you may never have taken this step.
I know. And I should, maybe he's a famous art historian somewhere.
Yeah,
maybe he's a colleague in the world.
He
was just a guy in front of me in this line, right?
I know. That's pretty amazing. So you got to do what you really love.
But life is like that, right? I mean, you just don't know who you're going to meet in line.
Yeah,
or,
it's the little things.
But my parents also, even though they're, working class, I guess, for the, lack of a better word, they really wanted me to do what I wanted to do. So yeah, they were not interested in having a lawyer in Japan. They weren't interested in having a computer guru. They just wanted me to be happy. And so when I started to take art history classes and they saw that I really kind of blossomed and then started getting involved in museums, they started to come to museums, and whenever we'd travel, we'd go to museums. So, they supported me even though it wasn't on paper going to be a really high paying profession like a doctor or a lawyer. They just wanted me to be happy.
Right. And let's see, and you were the only one in your family, or the first one, I should say, to go.
Yeah, no, the only one of the five. They all have great careers and families and all that. They just had a different path, but I just couldn't get enough. And so when it was time for me to go to graduate school, I had to go back to mom and dad and said, how's the bank doing? And, but they were still very supportive. They paid for all my college, and, I worked, at the gas station, or I worked at museums throughout. I didn't, just take it for granted, but, the money. But they were very supportive.
Excellent, excellent. And
don't ask my brothers and sisters if they're mad, because they didn't get the same ongoing funds that I did. But
nobody was a mechanic, or you have a brother that's a mechanic.
Both my brothers were mechanics.
Oh, okay.
And they're both involved in the automotive world. So yes, they were fine.
Yeah. So there was a step with Cranbrook Museum on your way to your career. Could you tell me more about that?
Well, what's interesting is, I was working at the Henry Ford Museum, which is a really famous museum in Detroit. I was just lucky to get that job because it's one of those places that's really hard to get into. But a friend of mine I was working with at a historical society needed a partner. They work in partners there. And so at the Henry Ford Museum, I did a lot of great new things. I worked with glass, I worked with trains, I worked with cars. And one day, my boss gave me a job for out in New Hampshire, a job application for the Currier Gallery in Manchester, New Hampshire, and I took that. And then went back to graduate school. And then when I was getting out of graduate school, I needed an official job application, an internship. And so that brought me back to Manchester, New Hampshire, and I was just loving New England. But after all my degrees were done, I needed to get a real job, not connected to an internship. And so I looked in all these magazines that, I looked in a magazine that they have for museum jobs, and one of the jobs was Cranbrook. And although I didn't really want that job because it was 17 miles from my mom and dad's house and I was ready to take on the world, it was really a wonderful job. So Cranbrook is in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan, and it's a museum. It was an art museum that catered to contemporary art, but in this beautiful 350-acre campus. It was just lovely. And I had the benefit of living really close to mom and dad and my brothers and sisters.
Yeah, that's great.
I mean, the museum world, you really have to take the job that you get because they're so few and far between. So the fact that I could do a national search, because I was living in New Hampshire, did a national search, and it brought me back to, Bloomfield Hills, Michigan, was pretty surprising. Wow. And I was incredibly happy there. I thought I was going to be at Cranbrook forever. Never say forever.
Okay, so then what happened? How did you find out about Flowbiz?
Again, as a museum professional, there's a magazine that comes out monthly, and you just look through it to see what the other jobs are and openings and who got this job, who got that job. And there was a paragraph that said, Director of Education, Florence Griswold Museum, Old Lyme, Connecticut. And I'm like, I am happy as a clam here, but gosh, this job sounds really enticing. I was doing programs for families and children at Cranbrook, but unfortunately there wasn't a lot of money. I could do what I could do, but there wasn't big bucks behind it at that point. But the Florence Griswold Museum, they wanted me to be doing what I was doing, but they had just gotten this giant gift for the Hartman Education Center. So they had some funds. They were really developing the museum into the next phase. And I said, wouldn't it be nice to be doing all of these things I'm interested in and also have some financial support?
So that was
I applied.
That was a gift of money, not a gift of art.
That was a gift of money. Yeah. The Hartman family was really supportive that the museum wanted to kind of reach out to new audiences, younger audiences, families with children. And so they gave money to build a dedicated Hartman Education Center, which is kind of the heart of the museum's campus, where we make art. It's a nice, creative, messy space, to be kind of in contrast to the nice, the fine art galleries and historic house.
Okay, well, we're going to take a break now. So we have a wonderful little PSA for you, so pay attention because I think it's on public access television. And I'll be returning with David Rao from the Florence Griswold Museum.
'Tis the season for giving. Did you know that 40% of charitable donations are received during the last few weeks of the year? Unfortunately, there are some Scrooges out there who want to take advantage of those of us in the giving spirit. Watch out for overly emotional appeals or the pressure to give right away. Those are red flags of a scam. A reputable charity will take your donation as much tomorrow as it will today. So make sure to give yourself time to do research. You can start at give.org, the foundation arm of Better Business Bureau, which accredits charities just like BBB accredits businesses. Charities can demonstrate they are trustworthy by agreeing to in-depth evaluations to see if they meet BBB's standards for accountability. Also, be cautious about name confusion. When charities seek support for the same cause, the names can sometimes appear similar. Before you give, be sure you have the exact name of the charity to avoid a case of mistaken identity. To see a list of accredited charities and learn more about the signs of a scam, visit give.org.
We're back. Thanks for coming back. And I'm here with David Rao of the Florence Griswold Museum. And we're going to get into more interesting questions. So I want you to tell me about, you had an amazing past director of that. He hired you, was it? Or?
Yeah, so the Florence Griswold Museum, I started there over 26 6 years ago. But when I was at Cranbrook and I was loving my job, I did apply and I sent my letter and my resume to the Florence Griswold Museum, and it landed on the desk of Jeffrey Anderson. Jeff Anderson was the director then, and before he retired, he was there for 41 years and really shaped the museum into the place that most people recognize today. The museum started off as a small historical society with less than an acre of land, and now it's a 12-acre campus, complete as it had been, but that was a lot of buying back the farm, literally. And Jeff Anderson was really responsible for that. But I was just really lucky because I was working at Cranbrook Art Museum, and that's part of the Cranbrook Academy of Art. And Jeff Anderson's wife, Maureen McCabe, actually was a student there. So of course, when my resume came in and it said Cranbrook, bells went off. And as it happened, the Florence Griswold Museum was going for a major grant from the Kresge Foundation, which is in Troy, Michigan. So he had to travel to me. That's my bragging rights. He came to me, interviewed, I showed him what I had been doing at Cranbrook. I think he was impressed. There was still some competition. Other people were in line for the job, but after visiting Old Lyme and meeting the education folks at the museum, they offered me the job. And I remember I hired in, I came in April, it was still the mud season in New England. I wasn't quite sure. And then my mother months later said, "How's it going?" And then I was driving home along the Connecticut River. The marsh was just coming green. And I told my mother, I said, "I fell into a tub of butter, Mom. It's the most beautiful place."
Oh, wonderful.
And Cranbrook was beautiful. I wouldn't want to leave Cranbrook to come to any place that's not as beautiful. But I made a good choice because it's stunning here.
Lucky for you. And he also got back, somehow some art landed at that museum too about his time.
Jeff is always, slow and steady wins the race. And, we did not have a lot of money for the collection. A lot of the Florence Griswold Museum's collection came, the Florence Griswold collection came through donations. The museum is based on the art colony. The Old Lyme artists came basically from New York City to paint en plein air, and stayed with Miss Florence in her house. And then when that turned into a museum, it was those artists that we wanted examples of. So we got donations from families that brought things, gave us things from the family to keep their ancestor, in our mind. But Jeff was very good about being supportive of other art initiatives. And the Hartford Steam Boiler Insurance and Inspection Company up in Hartford, they were collecting the best American art with a Connecticut connection that they could find. And they asked Jeff to be kind of a consultant for this collection. And he's an expert in American Impressionism, so he was very giving of his time, never really expecting much out of it. They amassed an amazing collection of about 180 works of art, mostly paintings, some prints, and a couple sculptures. And then about 22 years ago, they were being bought out by a larger insurance company, and they decided that they wanted to donate that collection, but they wanted to donate it to one museum, and they kind of did it as a surprise. And so they called Jeff Anderson up to the corporation headquarters, and they asked if the Florence Griswold Museum would accept the entire collection. So overnight, the museum, with this Hartford Steam Boiler collection, the whole quality of our collection went up, and it just, it was a turning of the page where the museum really had a remarkable world-class collection. And so we then decided to become that. And I always tell people that now the Metropolitan Museum of Art, they know who we are because we have objects that they might want to borrow.
So that must have been his easiest question to ever answer.
Yeah.
Right? So now that you have all this art, I guess you had to get a whole active docent program. And I know you have a wonderful docent program.
Well, for those who don't know, the museum is 12 acres, and we have the Griswold House, we have the Education Center, we have a landscape center, we have a studio, and we have the Kriebel Galleries where we do ongoing shows of both historic and contemporary art. But the real jewel of the crown is the Florence Griswold House, the Griswold Boarding House for Artists. And we are very fortunate that we have volunteers from the community, docents we call them, who greet the public all day long. So unlike other museums where the volunteers come in, do a tour and go, we always have a fantastic core, like yourself, of volunteers who are there to welcome the public and share the story of Miss Florence and the Artists of Old Lyme, which is really a remarkable Connecticut story.
Yeah. Well, it's great fun for anyone out there that thinks they want to be a docent.
Always need more.
So we'll move on to October, because something really incredible happens in October. So if you could tell us that.
Well, I mean, this is another Jeff Anderson thing. You know, we were suffering the woes of the economic downturn in 2008, and you know, Jeff called me to his office and said, "I don't want to. You know, we gotta somehow survive this financial storm. Do you have any ideas of something we could do that would be not terribly expensive? We could really use this beautiful campus that we have and would be enticing?" And I said, well, let me put my mind to it. I don't have an immediate answer, but some friends of mine who had experienced a fairy weekend festival up in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, was very excited. So I came back and I said, Jeff, I don't know much about fairies, you know, those little winged creatures that fly around and make houses, but we could investigate. And I pitched the idea of doing the Wee Fairy Village. It was going to be for 3 weeks in October, that first season. I was hoping, you know, I got local artists who've never made fairy houses to create and install in all the nooks and crannies. And we had over 10,000 people that first year. So we decided to kind of figure out if that was more, you know, what was it? Was it being in October? Was it being, you know, local artists? What was the secret sauce? But 3 years later, we offered it year after year after year. And now that's what we do in October, is we do a fairy village, and it really has welcomed tons of people to the campus, and sometimes seems like it has a leg of its own. But every year we look forward to preparing the next Griswold Wee Fairy Village, and we have another one coming up in October.
Exciting. It's a good thing you got back all the land, because you need it for parking.
We need it all, right? Exactly.
Now, how many exhibits does a museum do per year, and what's involved? And
you know, well, we have two wonderful curators, Amy and Jenny, and the museum puts out about 3 major exhibitions a year. One in the kind of the winter, spring, one in the summer when all the tourists are coming through, and then a fall one. And but they work year round on this. Some of the exhibitions take years to plan. Others, you know, if we might be using a guest curator, it makes it a little easier. But as soon as one is done, they've already started working on the next one and 2 down. And so it's a constant process, but it allows us to offer something new. I mean, we love the Griswold House, but to get people to come back again and again, we feel we need to offer something new. So the museum is always trying to bring in new relevant exhibitions. And if anybody's never been, I hope they will try us out, because you know, it's a great way to get immersed in both local history, but also national art.
I just want to say, although this will date our show today, there's a Leo Jensen exhibit there that's just phenomenal. And I learned that he lives in Ivoryton, which is close to us all here, so that's remarkable.
Yeah.
That he lived there. Oh, and he did the bridge. That's what I want to say, because everybody knows
the Willimantic Frog
Bridge.
Yeah.
So
no, and so you know, we'll do we'll do things that really relate to Connecticut and Connecticut artists, and that's not necessarily contemporary, but he's a pop artist, so it's more modern than the old Lyme Art School.
Right. And
but then the next exhibition might delve into something completely different. So we try to, you know, we have our finger on the pulse of what's happening in the world, and we want, you know, our little corner of the world to reflect that.
Right, and he also, he was friendly with Centerbrook Architects, someone there who designed your building, strangely enough.
Yeah,
right?
it's a small world, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, the Centerbrook Architects of Centerbrook did the bridge for the Willimantic, and then they also built our Krebo Gallery.
And moving on a little bit, in 2019, there was another special event on the grounds of the museum. Do you remember that one?
Which one are we talking about? There's always something coming around.
It was a very personal one for you.
Oh, my wedding?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. No, I wanted the employee discount, right? So no, so my husband, I was a friend of mine, Dan Hansen, tricked me and brought me down to the corner of the museum property, and he proposed. And so at the museum, looking at up the Lieutenant River, he asked if I would marry him. And then we immediately planned the wedding, and we decided to get married at the Florence Griswold Museum for the staff discount. No, because it's such a beautiful place.
Okay.
And so the summer of 2017, we got married, and it was family and friends, and just what a gorgeous place.
There'll probably be people kneeling down all over the place now that you've said that. It's such a good place.
It is a wonderful place to get proposed to, and a great place to get married, that's for sure.
And now your family grew a little bit, I think. Oh, they're there, the members of your family, see?
You know, so Dan and I have dachshunds, and so our current little babies are Icarus and Daphne, and yeah, they give lots of joy. Dan is currently retired, so they are spoiled because they have somebody at home all day long.
That'd do it.
But when I put on my leather shoes today, I got in trouble because they get nervous. Leather shoes means
you're leaving.
work.
Oh, work.
Because they were COVID doggies, so we were home a lot. So,
yeah, they got
they bring a lot of
get
joy.
through that. And you're an artist, so tell me what you love to do when you have time.
Well, you know, the Fairy Village, I didn't feel like I could ask other people to do that work if I wasn't involving myself. So I make a fairy house every year. Had to teach myself how to make something small, using using small scale material, working in small scale but with different materials. But I collect antiques, I collect miniatures, and I put together. The fancy word is assemblage, but basically it's instead of a collage of flat things, I glue three-dimensional things together.
Yeah.
And I often will show them in local galleries or auction them, donate them to the museum to auction off. Right. Always a way to make money.
So we really are running low on time, but I did want you to mention two things that are absolutely wonderful, because there's so many wonderful things at Florence Griswold. The gardens and the Cafe Flow, if you could just say.
Well, now is the perfect time to be thinking of both of those. So the gardens at the museum are splendid, and they are maintained primarily by the Garden Gang, which is a core of volunteers who come every Friday morning and make sure that the gardens are spiffy for the busy weekend. I always tell visitors that if you're a weed on Thursday night, you're terrified because your time is short.
Sure.
Everything looks beautiful for Friday morning and Friday afternoon. And then a lot of folks have really enjoyed the Cafe Flow. Cafe Flow is the restaurant that we have along the veranda in Marshfield, has fantastic reviews, and the food is really remarkable. I mean, if people who are local have not tried, they really need to spoil themselves, because having a wonderful sandwich or salad with that view, there's nothing better.
It's amazing. It really adds a lot.
You're making me hungry. I might do that today.
Well, I think that we are, I'm not getting any more signals, so that this concludes our program. We hope you've enjoyed it and learned from it. Remember, shows on the Looking Back series air every Monday night at 7 o'clock on the public access channel 19. And or you can go into the Valley Shore Community Television website and follow the prompts, and you'll see any program. I'd like to thank our crew today, Anne Marie Lepard and Emily Miner, and our two camera people, Kay Tucker and Fred Perillo, and a special thanks to David Rao from the Florence Griswold Museum in Old Lyme. Without him, we would have no program. So, I'll see you next time. Oh, and thanks for watching.